Good morning. My name is Rabbi Chaim Belyak, and I'm pleased to welcome you to our ongoing program entitled Freighted Legacies. This is a unique program that comes to you in English and in Polish, and that gives me the opportunity, before I tell you about our program and introduce our speaker today, to remind you that you can listen to this program in the language you're most comfortable with by going at the bottom of your screen to choose either Polish or English by going to the bottom and seeing the caption that says interpretation there at the bottom, and you get to choose either English or Polish. And magically, or really not so magically, technically, we'll put you into the language stream, and you will be hearing either Marzena Szymanska, we have a picture of her, or you'll be hearing Marek Jozowski, and you'll be listening to a lecture, in this case given by Dr. Dominika Zakrzewska. And many of you will know Dr. Zakrzewska from previous Precious Legacies. She has served for many years as our program coordinator and is today appearing in a new guise. Her main work has been her academic work. And I want to share with you a little bit of her background and tell you about her academic background and introduce her topic, which I find fascinating and I think is an important challenge to some of the stereotypes and prejudices that I certainly have entertained in my life, and I think many other people have too. So her topic is good practices and challenges in building Polish-Israeli dialogue among young adults. And this is a work that has been presented in academic forums, but will be presented for us in a less academic register, but will nevertheless allow us to understand some very important dialogical work that Dr. Zakrzewska has been involved in. She brings a rich background in education and psychology. Currently, she teaches and I'm going to have difficulty pronouncing the name of the university, but I'm going to give it a try, at the Institute of Psychology in the Maria Zakrzewska University in Warsaw. And she is also a project manager for a foundation called the Living Bridge Foundation. As I said, many of you also know her work with Beit Polska as a program coordinator. And she is involved in studies at Hebrew Union College, where she'll soon be completing a master's degree in nonprofit management at the Zelikoff School of Nonprofit Management. Very rich background, very involved not only in the progressive movement in Poland, but also in the European Union for Progressive Judaism, as well as the World Union for Progressive Judaism. We are very pleased that Dominika is appearing as an academic and as an authority on a topic that is of interest to all of us who are concerned about the welfare of Jews everywhere and the welfare of the reputation of Israel. And the need for dialogue and conversation. So at this time, I will just pause to say that we'll report about other things. Towards the end of our hour, there's been an election. We have new leadership in the Beit Polska community, which is the umbrella organization of our work, and in the various communities of the congregations. And in our next session, we hope to introduce that leadership, and we'll probably hold that session in Polish and listen to its translation in English. But let me not delay the opportunity to hear Dr. Zakrzewska. Dominika, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi Chaim, and thank you to Friends of Jewish Renewal in Poland for invitation to this time change the role and become a speaker for Freighted Legacies program. It's a great pleasure to be able to share with you my both experience and also research results from the last few years of my work. So I'm also glad to see everybody who joined us today. I will be happy during the presentation to get your questions. Please put them in chat if you will have anything you would like to comment on or ask. I will be doing my best to look through the chat and make sure that I'm answering the questions either immediately or some a bit later on. Let me share a presentation. I hope it's working now. It's a bit of a challenge to be first time a speaker and also managing the technical part, but I will do my best to coordinate both and make sure that it will be working fluently. So let me tell you what I'm planning to talk about today. I will be speaking about good practices and challenges in building a dialogue between young adults from Poland and Israel, which is based on my work at the Living Bridge Foundation and also 3 parts of the research that I did. Firstly, in 2015, then 2018 and 2021. Among young adults and young professionals participating in various kinds of educational and leadership building programs. And let me start with giving just a short historical political background, although it will not be the focus of the presentation, but just to give a little bit of the time frame. So when we think about Polish-Israeli relations after World War II, and I will keep it very short. Please forgive me that I'm not getting deeper into this, but I would like to focus on other parts. So after 1947, when we fall until the fall of communist regime, in 1989, Poland was a part of the Soviet bloc. And here, during that time, Polish government was strictly following Soviet policy towards Israel. So this is the time when we cannot really speak about independent Polish policy or any kind of relations with Israel. However, from 1990 already, we can start developing political, military, economic, and cultural cooperation. This cooperation is developed quite quickly, and still until now, although with time you can probably hear about many challenges in Polish-Israeli political cooperation, still this cooperation is going on. And what is mostly interesting for me in this area is the agreement on cooperation in culture, science, and education from the year 1991. This is the agreement which still until now, with some changes, of course, over the years, is used for developing and framing the cooperation between Poland and Israel within projects dedicated to students, young adults, or young professionals. And this agreement tells us that both sides, meaning Polish state and Israeli state, both are declaring willingness in supporting cooperation within artistic activities, creating different kind of research, cooperation between universities and schools, exchange of experience of specialists from various areas, and so on, so on. There are many kinds of cooperation and areas enlisted in this agreement. And this is also a base for several sources of governmental funding for Polish-Israeli cooperation. Some of them, just to name them, are the funds offered by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Poland. Also, for a long time, there was available fund offered by the Prime Minister Chancellor of the Republic of Poland, Minister of Education, Minister of Culture, of course, number of private donors. And after Poland joined European Union, also we got a chance to use Erasmus Plus funding, which is funding offered by European Union for academic institutions and schools. And these are only some of the funding resources that are offered by the Polish side for supporting Polish-Israeli young adults and young professionals cooperation. This funding is used by a number of institutions, schools, universities, but also non-profits like foundations or associations. And the projects that are organized within this support are very diverse. So there are some artistic festivals, there are also publication efforts, research programs, and exchange study visits for students, young adults, high school students, different kinds of volunteering opportunities, and also some scholarships for students from both countries to move to another country and to study there. Also to mention, just for the background of this work, some of the bigger organizations that are working on organizing Polish Israeli students and young adults, young professionals exchange. One of the oldest exchanges that was organized was started by Jewish Historical Institute and then continued by in cooperation with Polish Museum of the History of Polish Jews. Then we have a number of programs run by Grodzka Gate and then theater in Lublin. Auschwitz Museum is also organizing quite an extended program. Forum for Dialogue, Living Bridge Foundation, Friends in Culture Foundation, schools and universities. And as I mentioned, these are only an examples. When we go deeper, we can find tens of organizations which are actually involved in some projects. Some of them are involved in this work regularly for several years, some of them just as a one-time experience within their intercultural international work. One of the things that I started with in my research work when I was interested what is behind the mutual bias, mutual prejudices between Polish and Israeli young adults was the source of the attitudes, actually quite negative attitudes at the time. And one of the first results that I got, which was quite surprising for me at the time, was that from Israeli side, from the side of Israeli young adults, the bias towards Poles was mostly emotional based. So here we mostly could speak about the family experience, the information that those people got from their ancestors, information that they got from what they learned about Poland at school. And from the Polish side, attitudes towards Israelis were mostly based on lack of knowledge. So here we could mostly speak about very small level of knowledge about Israelis, Israeli culture, but also about Jews and Jewish culture and Jewish history. It's important to mention in here that this situation changed very much until now. This was the situation around a decade ago, and of course it's still in place to some extent, but the change was really enormous. When I speak with young adults and university students right now, actually from both sides, their level of knowledge about both countries, about Polish-Israeli relations, is much, much higher. And also it's important to say that their openness to look from different perspectives and to discuss what they know, to accept that some of the information, some of the knowledge they have may be actually a bit different, is also very different from what it was before. So now I would like to move to how we were building educational activities to overcome mutual prejudices. And here you can see a picture of a group of young adults from Poland and Israel. And actually, I believe that when you look at the picture, for some of the students, you can easily say from which country they are. But there is also a number of students where we could easily say that they are either from Poland or from Israel. For some of them, it will be really difficult to decide where are they from. And one of the first surprises that we usually heard about from students participating in the programs was that they did not imagine before how similar they actually are to each other. So I would like to focus for the next 2-3 slides on one of the programs, Living a Bridge, Poland-Israel. And the idea of the program was quite simple, but also difficult to achieve. So the idea was to take a group of young adults from Poland and Israel, the group that will not be too big. So to allow creating personal connections between people and to allow them to get to know each other. Usually it was around 10 to 12 persons from each country. And to allow them to spend around a week together, both in Poland and in Israel. So altogether, it was giving us 2 weeks that those people were spending in the mutual company. And the requirement was that they will be staying together. So even if they were originating from the city in which the program was carried out, still we required that they will be staying together at the same hotel or dormitories to assure that they will actually be focused on the project activities and not interrupted by other obligations of their everyday life. It was also very important for us that it will not only be learning space, that it will also give a space for having fun together, for creating friendly relations, for getting to know each other, not only from the professional side, but also to learn more about personal beliefs, about each other's families, about their future plans, about their dreams. Another thing that was very important was carrying out activities supporting local communities. So no matter where the program was held, we were making sure that we are also involving the entire group into doing something for the local community, both in Poland and in Israel. So in the picture here, you can see one of the activities. The group was helping to paint Young Adult Center in Nazareth, which was both lots of fun and also they had the feeling that they are doing together something good for others. Of course, it had to be organized within some structure. So very important part for us was preparation, the part that was happening before people actually met. And with the time, we found out that the preparation was really playing a crucial role in what the results of the projects were. So during the preparation, we put lots of attention to make sure that our participants not only will get some information about the cultural differences and similarities between both countries, that they will understand what is the cultural code within which they should behave, but also to make sure that they have some level of common knowledge about each other's history. And I believe that if you will have a look at how the school curriculum in Poland and Israel is created, although there are attempts to make it adjusted to the reality, to make it as close to what actually happened in our history as possible, still there are some, actually a lot of differences. And especially at the beginning, we were surprised with how different ways of perceiving the same historical events students were coming, sometimes not really realizing that something happened, because not always the same things were considered important to mention by the Polish and Israeli schools. So to allow them to actually start a conversation, it was important to give them this mutual background. Then a very important part when the groups actually met was integration, and we put lots of attention to it because carefully planned and run integration part allowed them to feel comfortable enough and secure enough in this space that we created. So they actually could discuss difficult topics and raise difficult questions. So we only had once the situation when one of our partners did not do correctly the integration part. And I have to say that it was probably most difficult program I've ever been involved at. Because this did not really allow to carry out later on all rest parts of it in the effective way. So this integration was really, really important to go further to the part of deep discussions, which we usually tried to keep in the middle of the program. So to give time later on to debrief and to also speak about other topics that were important for our participants. And to, of course, move later on to pro-social volunteering activities. What were the challenges? So moving to challenges, especially in the first 2 years, one of the biggest problems we had with recruiting participants for the programs. It was really challenging to convince young people, both from Poland and from Israel, why they should devote their time to get to know each other. And only this very fact that young people, although having possibility to participate in almost fully funded program, did not want to take part in it, is showing how deep the prejudices on both sides were. However, until after a few years of leading the program, we already got to the situation when we had more people than we could accommodate for the projects. So this I see as a great success of it, that after coming back to their universities, they, our participants were telling to their friends, academic staff, or teachers what was their experience, and that they found it valuable to encourage their friends to take part in the following programs. Then the general knowledge that I already mentioned, which was actually very diverse, and creating a common ground in here was a huge challenge. Individual stories. It's also a very important thing to mention, especially when we talk about Polish Jewish and Polish Israeli history and relations. Because on one hand, we have the general knowledge, we have the knowledge about historical events. And on the other hand, we have personal stories, personal experience, which is very emotional and very appealing to people, very important, especially when it's coming from our ancestors, when it's coming from our family members, when it's something that actually created our identity. So in here, we also had to be very careful to use this knowledge as a part of the discussion, but also not allow it to be the only resource of information. Touching difficult knowledge, which I mentioned here, is actually one of the important and very sensitive parts of this kind of programs. And what we found out is that difficult knowledge have to be addressed, that it's not something that we can try to avoid, that we cannot build really constructive relations between people without allowing to touch the topics that are painful for them. If those topics were not discussed openly and facilitated in the right way, they would anyway be undertaken by participants in the informal time. And then it was impossible to predict in what way this discussion could go. Of course, all of that raised lots of emotions, which also had to be handled very carefully, with lots of empathy and with lots of professionalism. And one of the most challenging part, actually, besides all that I already mentioned, was funding. So although you saw that we had quite a number of sources that obviously were used, actually for this program from Polish side were used mostly funds from Foreign Minister, Prime Minister, Chancellor of Poland, and also from the Ministry of Education. From Israeli side, there were mostly municipality funds from various areas. But still, the fact that the program was organized for a small amount of participants, I mean, relatively small amount of participants, made it actually be quite expensive as for the times when it was run. So that used to be quite a challenge to deal with this part, although the results were very encouraging and very positive. Moving to the research results, the research that I was doing based on participants' experience actually touched mostly the area of mutual stereotypes, social distance perceived by participants, and also the way in which they saw similarities and differences between themselves. So matter of similarities and differences, here we can say that obviously after getting to know each other, people found much more similarities than they thought about initially, and these results were statistically significant. Another thing that I found out was that there was a significant reduction of mutual bias already after 1 to 2 weeks of professionally facilitated contact. And by observing participants, with some of them I'm still keeping in touch. And I can see that after 10 years, after the project finished, several of them are still keeping in touch. They are inviting each other for the life events like getting married or for the reason of birth of their children. So they are really keeping this contact alive. Of course, not everybody, but for many of them, it's still the case. And then thing that was actually surprising was that in some situations when the contact was under a time pressure, when it was very short and focused on historical topics, these stereotypes were actually raised. So this was a control group, which I also researched, which participated in different kind of programs and where they only had the chance to meet one time for 2-3 hours visits, which were in a hurry and under really lots of pressure. And then for those people, the fact that they had a chance to meet did not help to look more positive at the other side, but it actually worked totally opposite. So they started to feel much more negative about each other. And it seemed like this time was so short that they could actually confirm the prejudices that they had before. But it was no time to challenge these beliefs. And I think the most promising thing that came out from this research was that reducing the bias through contact with one of the minority or national groups, this case it was Polish-Israeli meetings, led to reducing declared bias towards other minority groups mentioned at the research. So in one of the tools that were used in the research, there were several minority groups mentioned, and among them were Arabs, Gypsy people, Germans, Russians. There were around 10. There were 10 national and minority groups. So when we got to the position of reducing the bias towards one group with which they had contact, it actually led to creating more openness towards others as well. And here it's also probably interesting to mention that actually the highest prejudices that were declared from the Polish side were towards firstly Arabs, then Gypsy people, and then towards Jews. So that was also interesting to see how these few groups towards which Polish young adults had highest bias towards were looking like. Okay, I see that there is a question in the chat.
It's not something you have to answer immediately. Just when you.
Were any of the Poles Jewish? Did any of the Israelis speak
Polish?
Speak Polish? No, none of the Israelis spoke Polish. But there were some of the Israeli participants had Polish roots. None of the Polish participants were Jewish. Yes, I think, but some of the Polish participants spoke basic Hebrew. But it was because of their personal interests or because of their university path and not because of their Jewish heritage.
Thank you. This is maybe a good place to say that if you have questions, they don't have to be answered immediately, but you can begin sending them in.
Yes, so I would like to conclude by reading a few testimonies from participants. For me, the most important thing in this program were that both the Polish and Israeli group could stay and live together. that gave us wonderful chance for better connection. The participation in this program will be useful for me in future. I met wonderful people during this project. The most important point of the program were the reflections, the conversations that we made every night, because it's very important for me to speak about all that happened during the day. The main thing is the ability to connect to each other, to find and focus on the every single things that we made with each other. I noticed that Polish and Israeli people are not so different as I thought. Thank you so much. And the other that I wanted to bring up was all the parts that involved interaction between the members of both groups were the most important for me. It gave all of us the opportunity to get to know each other, which in my opinion was the crucial objective of this program. This program gave me new essential experiences concerning intercultural cooperation. It gave me a new perspective on our common history as well as the future prospective cooperation. In my opinion, this program is perfect when it comes to finding prejudices existing in both nations. And one thing that I would like to mention at the end was that although you heard especially lastly about many tensions between Polish and Israeli government, the very positive thing to put attention to is that Polish young adults and youth exchange is still encouraged by both governments. So although we hear about and know about many other areas of tension, these programs are still supported by institutions from both countries, which is on one hand surprising, on the other hand giving hope that we can continue building a dialogue even in the very difficult political situation. And it's the more important that those people who are now youngsters or young adults in future will have important positions, and in future they will be the ones that will create this dialogue between the two countries. So the more they can get to know about each other right now, the more effective they can be in future in leading to constructive solutions.
Dominika, I take that as the cue that we can invite questions, and I'm going to invite Marek, if he is not translating, to join us. Marek has been until this last Sunday our chairperson for Beit Warszawa and for Beit Polska. He is now in the position of being the past president, immediate past president of both, and will still be joining us in our Freighted Legacy is a very important part of our translation team. But Marek, while people are formulating questions, and I don't see any questions yet, I thought perhaps you would just maybe say a little bit about the elections, and we next program hope to introduce in person some of the board members from Beit Troy Miasto, Beit Warszawa, Beit Konstancin, and the Beit Polska boards. Maybe you could just say a little bit about the process and what's going on. You're now in, okay, so we'll need to be switched over.
Please. I will.
Okay, now you're.
Okay, am I on the main floor then? And
yeah,
audible
you are.
to everyone. Thank you very much. All I can say is that it's for any Jewish organization, and particularly one that is a religious organization with representing a very small minority that Jews are in Poland right now, requires continuity, requires institutional continuity in order to develop in a harmonious way. And our statutes and our system of, let's say, democratic elections that happens every 3 years safeguards that continuity. So under these conditions, since we are boards that are elected freely and perform their duties also freely and willingly and without compensation, we moved along these principles, and we held election both to the local communities boards, because this is all coordinated well in time. So both the community in the western Tri-City area on the Baltic Sea, which we refer to as Beit Trójmiasto. The elections were held there. In proceeding to the and the same happened in Warsaw, the Warsaw community, the central city's progressive Jewish community, and that laid the ground for these communities to send their representatives to the elections within the central umbrella organization that Beit Polska is, and that name stands for that. This is a support organization that coordinates funding and technical support and programming for the communities, which retain their autonomy entirely in their process. So this happened a week ago. This process took place a week ago, and we're happy that maybe one feature that I will mention before I hand over to Chaim is that as opposed to a male-dominated boards that we had in the past, this time we actually have a strong women's, let's say, representation in the managerial positions, which we're very satisfied.
Very, very important. We will introduce everybody in our next Freighted Legacy. I'm proposing that we actually have a conversation in Polish, and we'll listen to the translation. Thank you for that. This has been a bit of an interlude to invite people to write questions in chat, which I've not seen any yet. So
hands raised, so maybe I will just try to allow.
Okay.
I will start with Dobrochna. I hope I pronounce it well because she was first.
Yes, it is a Polish name, and you did pronounce it correctly. Can you hear me? I just want to let you know that probably one of the reasons that you are not getting any chat questions is that my chat, for example, is disabled. So somebody has to enable chat.
Okay, let me have a look. Does it work right now?
Let me see. Yes.
Thank you for mentioning this.
Thank you. I will now post my question. And now you will probably get many questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And also, I see that Karen is raising her hand.
So I do think it's best if the people who raise their hands get to ask the question personally, but the rest of the questions should be in chat, if that's possible. So please, Ms. Fire or Fire.
I'm Dobrochna, unless there's some other fire on the.
Okay.
So
Dobrochna.
Yeah, Dobrochna, yes. Thank you. I'm now putting in my question into the chat, so you can cross me off the raised hand part of it. Thank you.
Go ahead, please.
I just did. Oh,
Oh.
I'm writing my question in the chat.
Okay, David Cater is needing to leave, so David's question is now, I think, available in chat. Let's get to that if it's possible.
I see the question from David Cater. Were participants Jewish from both sides, Polish and Israeli sides? From Israeli side, students were Jewish, yes. Actually, all of the students from Israeli side were Jewish. From the Polish side, there were no Jewish students, or maybe it's better to say no students that would declare that they were Jewish.
Okay.
But there were students from the Polish side who studied Hebrew language, and there were some who studied Judaistic studies. So there were some who were strictly interested in this topic. But as far as we got information from them, they did not have a Jewish background.
So let's go to the next question. Could you please mention one specific prejudice that each side raised?
That's a very interesting question. And well, the most surprising thing that I heard from Polish participants at the preparation meetings, and I need to mention again that it was a decade ago, so a lot changed from that time. So the most surprising thing I heard from Polish participants of the program before they met with Israelis was that they really believed that Israelis enjoyed hurting Palestinian kids. Yes, that was the most surprising and shocking thing that I heard. And from Israeli side, actually, quite a few people told me before coming to Poland that they were afraid that everybody would recognize that they are Jewish, and that people would in some ways express that they don't want them to be here. So then when they came, and at some points we traveled by public transportation, they came to me one day very surprised and asked me, how is it possible that they are just traveling by bus in Warsaw and nobody says anything? So it was really this high level of surprise from them, that nobody recognized they are Jewish and that nobody behave hostilely towards them.
This next question is from Tzvia, and it's a much more complicated question. What year did the program take place? Was it at the same group of Polish youth spending time with Israeli youth? You can answer that. And did they travel to one country right after the visit to the other country? I think you mentioned a 10-year interval, so I'm wondering about the long-term effects you cited.
So the program operated from 2012 until 2018. Then we had another program that ran until beginning of pandemic, but this specific one, or actually a bit longer. It was from 2010. Then the organization that was running it changed the name, but it was pretty much between 2010 until 2018, and then until the pandemic, it in a bit modified form. Did they travel to one country right after the other? It was not right after the one visit right after the other in the way that they would finish and go to another country. But it was at the same academic year. So usually it was a few weeks break between. Usually one of the visits would take place in spring and the other in autumn. So there was some break, and this break we would also usually use for facilitating some activities for them remotely. So it was not time when they were left alone, but this break was there.
I'm going to ask Marek if he would like to share the next question.
Yes, very quickly, let me go up. And is it the question coming from Sharon?
Yes.
How much of the pre-war Jewish life was known by the students from both of the countries, and were there stereotypes about the other based more on pre-war or post-war imagery and information from each of the country's political bodies? Sorry, I lost it. Political bodies or communities. In other words, what was the early knowledge? What was you mentioned the fact that there were some preparation, creation of common knowledge base, but what was the situation you encountered before they actually went through this stage?
So actually on both sides, the knowledge about Polish-Jewish relations and Jewish history in Poland in the pre-war time was very limited. There was some, but it was not in-depth knowledge. And one of the things that was the most maybe shocking for me was that especially in the first years, students from Israel who participated in the program did not really associate the situation of Poland during World War II with the situation of Jews in Holocaust. So somehow in the way in which they saw this part of the history, it usually took them some time to realize that all of that was happening simultaneously. So sometimes they just imagined that Holocaust happened in the country where no other challenges were happening. And it usually took us some time to actually get to this point when both sides understood how many things were happening at that time. Not to undermine anybody's suffering, but on the other hand, we had to make participants realize what was the real picture and how complex was all that was happening at that time.
Thank you. I'll take the next question. It's from Karen Goodman. Were participants chosen for leadership backgrounds, or what were the criteria for their being chosen?
One of the criteria was age, because we needed to make sure that people will be at a similar level of education or studies. It varied from year to year. But also their social involvement was very much taken into consideration because we wanted to assure the possibility of participants to share their knowledge and experience. So their leadership and social involvement was one of the key parts in the recruitment process.
I believe we skipped one question, Chaim. If
Go
you
ahead.
go up, there is another question coming from Terry Vineyard.
Go ahead.
do the participants identify themselves as practicing their religions? Which religions? And do they discuss their specific religious beliefs? Are most of the students involved in
well, it's a great question. And here I have to mention that it changed very much within a few years. In the first study, which I did in 2015, majority, I would say 95-96% of Polish students declared as Catholics. Some of them, those few other percents, declared as not practicing or not religious. And from Israel, students declared as Jewish. But later on in the second study that was done, most of students declared as not practicing. And actually, when we asked about their how they define themselves, they would even usually describe themselves as simply a human being or European Union citizen as opposed to Polish citizen. So this change in how they perceived themselves, especially from Polish side, was very interesting, how it changed over the time.
Thank you. I think there's one more question that I see here. What were some of the reasons that the young people stated for wanting to participate in the program? This is from Sofia.
So mostly they mentioned that they wanted to meet people from other countries. Some of them were encouraged by their friends and by their teachers to participate. So there was also some external motivation, like getting extra points for participation at the project for their university courses. And I would say that also the fears that they had initially were interesting, because most of Israeli students who participated at this program before, as high school students, participated at the heritage trips to Poland, which were mostly focused on visiting Holocaust commemoration places. And most of them had to face the trauma that they had after those previous trips. So coming back to Poland for most of them was, for most of Israeli participants, was quite challenging emotionally experience. And most of them mentioned after it that they were actually happy to get a chance to see Poland from the other side, and to also connect with Polish participants, and to be able to discuss how both history and future of Polish-Israeli and Polish-Jewish relations are seen by people from both sides. So this was very interesting to also hear about what they had to overcome to get to the point when they came to Poland again, and what were their reflections afterwards.
I want to thank you, Dominika, for spending this time telling us about your research. I know that in your formulation about so many things, you are careful, academic, and diplomatic. And so appreciate your care and wisdom, and appreciate your sharing this with us. I know that Dominika will be available to answer questions, and I know that some of this is written up in various papers, and we can, with Dominika's permission, maybe make those papers available on our website. I want to call to your attention two things that are on our website. First of all, we have not yet published our February date and topic, but as stated, our February topic will be a roundtable discussion with the new leadership that has become at the center of our work in Poland. And it will probably be in Polish. And we'll be calling on Marek and Marzena. Let me thank both of them now, but also thank them for that. This time they'll have to be involved in reverse translating from Polish to English, which I rely on a great deal when I visit Poland. And I was recently in Poland just last month, and I had a opportunity to visit one of the key programs that we're involved in. In addition to the fact that we are an organization involved with building Jewish life, supporting the congregations that are developing their own programs. Thank you for putting your email. We have been involved in key efforts to help the women and children who have in the millions come to Poland. And I visited one of the new centers, and our efforts are under the name of Janusz Korczak Child Care Center, which is part of a consortium supporting Spinka. I need to take a moment to invite you to look at that, those names. Janusz Korczak, of course, should be known to everyone. A pre-World War II educator, physician, person who started orphanages for Jewish children, and as was the custom pre-World War II, Catholic children, stayed with his children in the Warsaw Ghetto and went with his children to Treblinka. Author of children's stories that I read to my children. And I hope that people will appreciate why we have chosen that name as part of our effort to support the children that have come from Ukraine. And we are part of Spinka. Spinka has a double entendre. In Polish, it means a hair clip or something that clips things together. But in Ukrainian, it means a backrest, something you can lean your back on. These children number 600 in close to 100 childcare centers. This is an enormous effort that was initiated with Jonathan Mills, who was one of the founders of Beit Warszawa, our original congregation. We have information about the founding on our website. And this is an effort by the progressive Jewish community to participate in real on-the-ground work. So I invite you to look at this. I'm going to now put this in chat. I invite you to look here at the short interview with him, Jonathan Mills, and get a chance to see the kids at one of the centers. It was frankly inspirational. And one of the other things that I want to share with you, I'm just going to put this in chat now, the link. I think I have the link. Yes, there it is. That's the link for the centers. I want to call to your attention the fact that we have, on a weekly basis, the wonderful reflections and sermons by two of our Polish rabbis. They usually take turns. Sometimes they double up. Menachem Mirki and Mati Kirschenbaum. Menachem is 3 months away from ordination, and Mati has been ordained now 2 years. And this week they crossed wires, and we are blessed with the fact that they ended up with publishing their sermons. Both their sermons are on our website, and I invite you to read them. They're interesting, contrasting views. People who sometimes think that the history of Polish Jews is all that, it's all history, miss the fact that there is an emerging, vital Jewish community. And we, of course, invite your interest and support for the work we do. You're invited to sign up for our mailing list. You're invited to help us develop our community with your financial support. Again, I want to thank Dominika. I want to thank Marek, who remains one of our stalwarts in our community, and thank him for his work. I want to thank Marjana, does so much of the translating for paper stuff and for electronic stuff and for the work we do. And we look forward to seeing you in February as we prepare for our next Freighted Legacy, a wonderful program, I believe, that has brought us to see the important bridge between Polish Jews and their descendants. We're Polish Jews still. Thank you.